If you're looking at your bulletin, it says the scripture reading, but I'm going to incorporate that just as I'm preaching. So I'm going to go ahead and dismiss the children, and anybody else that doesn't want to listen to me this morning is welcome to go wherever. But if you're an adult, I'm keeping track of who you are. You never know what kind of a day or what kind of a week people are having. I came in here this morning and I sat down, and the first thing I spotted is looks like a pill, and I'm not sure if it was a breath mint meant for me, or if the last person up here had a headache or something, but I wasn't going to find out. And then I found that there's a Kleenex, and I'm not sure, again, if this one has been used or tucked under here, if it was here in case they needed it. So you never know how somebody's week has been going. This last about 10 days, I've been traveling a lot. I had a 40th high school reunion. Some of you know that I grew up in South America. I went to high school in South America. There were 13 of us in my senior class. And we decided that we wanted to get together. And so we decided that North Carolina was about the central point for all of us. I was coming from here, somebody else from Nebraska. We had someone from Texas, someone from Florida, Virginia, Pennsylvania. And one person from Europe made it. Another was in Europe that wanted to come, and it didn't work out for her in the end. So we kind of came from all over, and we met in North Carolina for a few days, and we reminisced about our times in high school. There were 9 out of 13 that graduated together after 40 years. We thought that was pretty good. And we talked about growing up and going to school and the things we used to do. And one of the things we used to do was we played a lot of games, outside games. We loved playing games like tag. You know, when we were younger, most of us were together from kindergarten through 12th grade. Several of us were born in Peru. And so we were a very close group. So we played games like tag, or games like kick the can, or hide and seek. And then, as I was reflecting on hide and seek, there's a phrase that we would yell, kind of when the game was over. If you couldn't find somebody, you yelled that phrase. Well, after I was in North Carolina, I took a few days, went to Florida to visit my parents. They're 91, and so we were sitting around one evening, and I asked, I said, do you guys remember the phrase that you yell when you're playing hide and seek when the game is over, when you want everybody to come out? And Mom immediately says, Olly, Olly, Oxen free. And Dad looks at us like we're crazy, and I was like, that's right. And Dad goes, I don't remember that. And so again, it just shows we all come from different areas. Apparently Dad didn't play hide and seek, right? But in doing this, we would yell out, Olly, Olly, oxen free, and people would come out. And so I began to wonder, where in the world did that phrase come from, right? Has anybody ever thought, where is that phrase? Do you guys even know that phrase? Do you use that phrase, or am I like, wait, I see a few heads nodding. Okay, good. I wanted to make sure that we're communicating a little bit here. Where did that come from? I mean, do you ever think about where that, I'd never thought about where it comes from. And so I decided to do a little bit of research. And so I started digging in, and I found out that nobody really knows, right? That's great. Google really let me down there. Some think it comes from a phrase, all ye out, come free. And it's kind of like something that Jesus said one time that we're going to look at this morning. If you have your Bibles or a device that you look at, John chapter 11 is where we're going to be spending our time. And in the book of John, John wrote this book so that people would realize that Christ was indeed the Son of God. And John wrote this book so that people would glorify God the Father because of that. And in the book of John, there's 7 different I am statements that Jesus said. 7 different times Jesus said, I am. He said, I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the door. I am the good shepherd. I am the truth and the life. I am the true vine. And today's message, we're going to have another one of those phrases that Jesus also said as well, where he said that I am in order to bring glory to the Father. And so in John chapter 11, starting with verse 1, our next slide, it says, Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. And it was Mary who anointed the Lord with oil and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, he whom you love is ill." But when Jesus heard it, he said, "This illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so the Son of God may be glorified through it." So we actually know more about Lazarus' family, about his sisters, than we know about Lazarus himself. We know that his sisters were followers of Christ, that he was also. We're reminded of this when we see that it was his sister Mary that had anointed Christ with oil and wiped his feet with her hair. And Lazarus was with his two sisters. They lived in Bethany. Bethany was a little village 2 miles outside of Jerusalem. So, not quite a suburb probably, but very close in proximity to Jerusalem. And this event appears to have happened Jesus' final week or thereabouts. Jesus was on his way to Jerusalem. Bethany is actually on the road from Jericho to Jerusalem. So if you would come up, which Jesus did his final week, he came up from Jericho to Jerusalem. 2 miles before you get to Jerusalem, you run into this little village of Bethany, which is where Mary and Martha lived. And so we don't know exactly when or where Jesus was when he received this message to, come quick because my brother's sick, right? But Mary and Martha sent this urgent message to Jesus saying that, hey, the one that you love, Lazarus, he's very sick. We do the same thing, right? If we're sick or someone who we love is sick, we generally don't send and call the healer to us, but we generally try to get to the healer, right? If we're sick, we go to the doctor, right? If someone that we love is hurt, if they're sick, we go to urgent care. We rush to the emergency room or the hospital, right? It's the same thing. We try to get face-to-face with someone who can help heal us. And when Jesus received this message, he responds probably the way they hoped, because he said, "This illness does not lead to death. It's for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." If you're like me and you have a loved one who's dying, if you have a loved one who's very sick and you think is dying, and Jesus sends you a message that says, "This illness doesn't lead to death, but it's for the glory of God," you'd be pumped. Yes, he's answering, right? No death and God getting the glory. It's a win-win, because we all say that we want God to get the glory, but we also, honestly, we all kind of want to keep living a while. Not too many of us are just ready to check out. And so they're saying, yes, Lazarus is going to be healed and God's going to get the glory. This is a double win. It's exactly what we want. And so continuing on, next slide, John 11:5 and 6, it says, "Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was." Jesus loved Mary and Martha and Lazarus. We'd established that earlier. It's stated explicitly here. But then verse 6 starts out, "So Jesus loved Lazarus, so when he heard that he was ill, he didn't go to heal him. Instead, he stayed 2 more days where he was." And you read that and it's like, that doesn't seem very loving to me, right? Someone's sick, you send for them because they have the power to heal you. They can say it, it's done. And they don't come. Because Jesus had bigger plans for Lazarus, and he wanted to make sure that God the Father was glorified. And continuing on in the next verse, in verse 7, it says, "Then after the 2 days, he said to his disciples, let's go to Judea again." And it was at this point that if we would read, I'm not going through the whole chapter in John because of time constraints, but if we would read this, we would see that there was essentially a death warrant out for Jesus. The Jews, the leaders, were trying to kill him. It's like his face was on a wanted poster in every post office in Jerusalem. Like that wanted poster was plastered on the telephone poles around town, right? And so we're not going to go into the details here, but if you read it, you'll see that the disciples are expressing their concern. It's like, it's probably not the place to go. They're trying to kill you there. And then throughout this discussion, Jesus says that Lazarus is sleeping. And the disciples, they're excited. Yes, because he's been healed. right? We don't have to go after all. It's just like the centurion. The disciples are probably remembering Jesus healed the centurion's servant without Jesus even going there because of the centurion's faith. And the disciples, they're probably in their mind going, this is great because if Lazarus is resting, he's been healed. And not only that, not only has he been healed, we don't have to go to Jerusalem where we might get killed because they're after Jesus, right? So again, it's a win-win. But when Jesus said that Lazarus was sleeping, it was a phrase, just like we use phrases, right? We say that somebody has passed away. We might say they've left this earth. Or maybe we just say they croaked, or the guy finally kicked the bucket, right? He didn't kick the bucket, he died, right? And Jesus finally just gets to the point. In verse 14, he says, Jesus told them plainly, Lazarus has died. And for your sake, I'm glad that I was not there so that you may believe. But let's go to him. So Thomas, called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, let us go also, that we may die with him. See, Jesus is saying, Lazarus is dead, and I'm glad. Like I said, this story just seems to have so many conflicts in the way we think. Jesus loved Lazarus, so he didn't go see him. He waited 2 days. And then Jesus says, Lazarus has died, and I'm glad. And the disciples are going, what's going on? But he was glad he wasn't there because he wasn't there to heal him. Jesus wanted to glorify God. And I'm sure that confused the disciples and those with him. And then when Jesus says, we're going to go to Judea, we're going to go to Jerusalem, Thomas is going, we may as well go too. We may as well go too because they're going to kill him and they're going to kill us, but at least we'll be with him. Because there was this warrant out, like I said, for Jesus' arrest. Going to Bethany, 2 miles from Jerusalem, that's like walking into the hornet's nest. And Thomas knew that the odds weren't good. And then it was 4 days later, or 4 days after Lazarus died, that they finally arrived in Bethany. 4 days. I don't know how much time happened between the time Lazarus got sick and they sent this message to Jesus. But Jesus got the message. He waited 2 days, and when he arrived, it was 4 days. It could have been a week or more length in time from the time that Mary and Martha sent this message to Jesus saying, come heal our brother, and the time that Jesus showed up. 4 days after he died. And some of you have lost family member, and some of you have lost friends, and you know the pain. Imagine the pain of Mary and Martha. Imagine the pain of their friends. They knew Jesus well, right? They loved Jesus. They were with Jesus. They were close friends, and they'd all seen Jesus heal all sorts of people. They knew the power that Jesus had. They had experienced that, had no doubt that he was capable of healing their sick brother. And as their brother got sicker, they expectantly waited for Jesus to come. They expected him to arrive. They were sure he'd come any minute, and he didn't. And their brother got sicker, and he began to slip in and out of consciousness. And they're sure that he's coming, and he didn't. And over these days, they're waiting expectantly. He's got to be coming. Where is he? He'll be here soon, won't he? And finally, Lazarus died. And imagine knowing that Jesus could have saved him if he had been here, and he didn't come. We thought he loved us, right? And so they prepared his body for burial. They wrapped it in cloth. They covered it in spices to help mask the smell as it decomposed, and they carried it and placed it in a tomb. And all the while, I'm sure in their minds they were going, what happened to Jesus? What happened? Why hasn't he come? He could have prevented this. We have the same thought sometimes too, right? And finally, 4 days after Lazarus has died, Jesus comes strolling into town. Martha goes running out to meet him. In our next slide, John 11, 21 to 26 says, Martha came to Jesus and pours out her heart. She says, Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. And Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. And Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet he shall live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? And on the next slide, she said to him, Yes, Lord, I believe you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world. See, Martha, she pours out her heart. It's like, Jesus, you could have prevented this. And Jesus replies with an I am statement. He says, I am the resurrection and the life. I am the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet he shall live. And whoever lives and believes shall never die. See, Jesus is the life. But not always the way we see it, because Lazarus was still dead. Right? Lazarus is still in the tomb. His body was decomposing. He was beginning to rot. And then Jesus asked to go to the tomb. Jesus asked, let's go to the grave, right? Again, we do the same thing. There's so many similarities here in what we do. We go to graves. We go to remember and honor. We take flowers and place them on graves. We go to show respect. And so on our next slide, starting in verse 38, it says, when they came to the tomb, then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Jesus said, take away the stone. Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, Lord, by this time there'll be an odor, for he has been dead for 4 days. They didn't embalm like we do, right? The body, it would break down quickly. My dog, a few weeks ago, my dog killed a groundhog. And so we've got an invisible fence, and I took the groundhog, what remained of it, and I threw it back across the fence into the timber. All was good. And then a few days later, I had a bunch of brush from some stuff that we were trimming, and I took it to throw it in the timber. And for some reason, I wasn't thinking, and I took it to throw it about where I'd thrown that groundhog. And it took my breath away. It was so rank, I thought I was going to throw up. And that was a groundhog. Imagine what a grown full body is going to do sitting out 4 days. And imagine Mary and Martha. I mean, who wants to go through that? We don't want to think of our loved ones as a rotting corpse, right? Jesus, open up that. We don't want to open up that grave. We don't want to go through that. We don't want to smell that. And on the next slide, in verse 40, Jesus said to her, did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around me, that they may believe you sent me. When he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out! And the next slide says, the man who had died came out, his hands and feet bound in linen strips, his face wrapped with cloth. And Jesus said to them, unbind him, let him go. See, Jesus said, Lazarus, come out. You know why he said, Lazarus, come out? Because if he didn't, if Jesus had just said, come out, every grave within earshot would have burst open. There would have been people everywhere. Because that is who Jesus is. He is the life. It'd be like playing hide and seek in the cemetery, and people are hiding behind tombstones, and someone's saying, Olly, Olly, Oxen free. And at that moment, all the graves open up and people come out of them. It's exactly what would have happened. So Jesus said Lazarus. He didn't need everybody at that point. That was come later. And Jesus is indeed that resurrection and the life. And the thing is, the same Spirit that later raised Jesus from the dead, dwells in the hearts of believers. And because Jesus died on the cross and rose from the dead, we have the full assurance that Christ has defeated death forever, and that one day he will resurrect us from the dead too. But not quite like Lazarus, because we're not going to die a second time. Can you imagine Lazarus? The guy was living his life, and he died, and then he was resurrected, and he's going to have to die again. Think you thought about that? Well, at least I know what's coming. Not going to be quite as scary the second time around, right? He was alive. He was dead. He was resurrected. And then he was actually hunted down to be killed. If we would read, we're not going to read it, but if you would read the rest of chapter 11, the chief priests and the temple, they actually were hunting Lazarus to kill him a second time. I don't know what they thought the odds of that were going to be. You know, you kill a guy or a guy dies and he raises from the dead. Can you kill him again? I don't know. But Lazarus, he came out of the tomb, and Jesus said, unbind him. Get those grave clothes off of him. And he's done the same thing for us. Romans 3:23 says, every one of us has sinned. Romans 6 says, the wages of those sin are death. We are bound and dead and bound in our sins, just like Lazarus in his grave clothes, and Jesus calls him out. See, Jesus defeated sin on the cross. When he rose from the dead, it's as if he shouted, all ye oxen free, or all ye outcasts, you're free. You're free. He's saying, get out of those grave clothes. Get out of the bondage of sin. You're not bound by that anymore. I am the resurrection and the life. And you can live again because I've paid the price for those sins. Continuing on in verse 45, it says, many Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what he did, believed. Like, duh, right? If you see someone who goes up to a grave and tells somebody to come out, and they do, I would believe, right? I would believe. They believed. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. So the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered the council and said, what do we do? For this man performs many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and the nation. Continuing on the next slide, it says, but one of them, Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, said to them, you know nothing at all, nor do you understand that it is better for you that one man should die for the people, not that the whole nation should perish. He did not say this on his own accord, but being the high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the nation, and not for the nation only, but also to gather into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. So from that day on, they made plans to put him to death. See, many saw and believed, but some went and reported to the Pharisees what had happened. And the Pharisees, they didn't know what to do because Jesus had just raised someone from the dead. He just called somebody out of the tomb. It was unheard of. But they were afraid of losing their power if they let him go unchallenged. And so they were afraid, and rightly so, that Jesus was going to upset the apple cart, that he was going to turn their world upside down. And if he did, then the Romans, who were the occupying force, the Romans would come and crack down on them, crack down on this disorder, crack down on everything that was changing. And in doing that, the Romans would take away some of the freedom and the prestige and the power that the Pharisees had. And they didn't like that option. And so Caiaphas said, hey guys, we got to make a decision. Are we going to let this happen? Are we all going to pay the price? Or is he going to pay the price? Right? All of us or him? Reminds me of my days back in driver's ed. Long time ago, I talked about being in high school, so, a long time ago I took driver's ed. I remember a few things from high school, and I remember our driver's ed teacher telling us, said, when you get behind the wheel of this vehicle that weighs several thousand pounds, you might have a tough decision to make. Because you might be driving sometime, and there might be a crowd on the sidewalk, and no place to go on the other side. And that's fine. And then a young child may run out in front of you chasing a ball. And you might have to decide, are you going to hit that child, or are you going to go into the crowd? Is it going to be one to spare the crowd, or are you going to take out the crowd? He said, you might be driving and have two cars coming at you. And you know that you're going to hit one of them. You have to decide which one it's going to be. One has one occupant. One is a van with a whole family. Which one are you going to take? And it's the same. Caiaphas is saying, what are we going to do? Are we going to take the one out to save everybody else? Or are we going to let him live and do this? And Caiaphas says, we're going to take out this one man in order to save our nation. Jesus had made this statement. He said all these statements, and one of those was I am. He said, I am the light. See if this works for me here, if I can light a candle from a candle. and not blow it out. No, Jesus said, I am the light of the world. And then the Pharisees, they made plans to kill Jesus, right? To fulfill this prophecy. But think about the irony of killing the one who says they are the light, right? Can you kill the one who is the resurrection and the light of the world? Can you blow out, he's that light. Could they take it out? And who knows? So they tried to blow it out, and it kept on blowing. And they tried to take out his life, right? But Jesus said, I am the light of the world. I am the resurrection. And if this candle works like it's supposed to, it will prove me right. Because you can't put out Jesus as the light of the world. Right? It just can't be done. They tried to snuff him out, thinking that they would save themselves from the Roman occupation, thinking that they were saving Israel by getting rid of Christ. Instead, they were saving everyone. They weren't saving just Israel. They were saving all of us. How do you put out a candle that doesn't blow out? See, you can't. If I burn down your church, you will never invite me back, right? Through his death, Jesus has overcome sin. He's paid the price. He's come out of the grave, and he's called us to come out also, to come out and remove that bondage of sin, to remove the grave clothes of sin, right? He says you don't need those anymore. Come out and be unbound. Olly, Olly, oxen free. All ye, all ye. Come out, be free. And if there's anyone here this morning that hasn't responded to that command, man, come talk to me or talk to Pastor Don or talk to someone else. Let us try to answer any questions you might have. I might not have. I know I don't have the answers to all of them. Don has a lot of answers, but talk to one of us. Let us help you put death behind you to see how to live with the resurrection and the life. And if you have accepted what Christ has done for you, if you're free from that bondage, if you're free from the new life, let's help other people to see that, and let's also live like it. Let's live like we're free. He's freed us. He's called us out of the grave, just as he called Lazarus out. We're free. Let us live like we're free. I invite you to stand for our closing hymn. Tell me the stories of Jesus, number 277 in the hymnal. 277.